When it's done, shit. Like, teaser, bitch, Uber to my Uber to my.
I know some of y'all are slow, so active listening is important. That being said, here are a list of things that aren't racist but feel like it. Number one, when you get in an Uber and they change the music, you mean to tell me you went from country to Chief Keef by coincidence? I think not. Number two, white people who agree with everything black people say. Even we don't agree with each other most of the time. That's how I know your ass is up to no good. Number three, getting an American flag or bald eagle tattoo. I know some of you guys are gonna say, oh, so being proud of your country is racist? I don't know, you tell me. And number four, the first yellow Power Ranger being Asian. Either I'm missing something or that's some of the most racially motivated shit I've ever seen.
Please stop scrolling if you or someone that you love wants top surgery. I got top surgery in August of 2022, so this year. And I don't regret top surgery, but I do regret who I got surgery with, and I need to talk about it. The reason it's so important that this is on TikTok is because so is she. She has a massive platform, and her name is Dr. Gallagher. 4 days after top surgery with Dr. Gallagher, my top surgery incision split open and started bleeding. At first, she said that it was just bruising, and then when she saw me in person the day before I flew home, she said that it was fluid buildup and that it had to just bleed out on its own through the open wound. I flew back to Ohio, and the bleeding did not stop. I was waking up to blood all over my clothes and sheets every single day. I could barely move or leave the house. At one point, I did decide a couple weeks after surgery to go out with some friends. I was slow, I was careful, and about halfway through the night, a blood clot the size of a golf ball fell out of me. I was rushed to the emergency room. I was in tachycardia by the time I got there. They admitted me and paged their plastic surgery team. The resident there took a photo, and I sent that photo as well as the blood clot to Dr. Gallagher. She replied back and made a joke that I was menstruating and said I didn't need to go to the ER, even though I'd already gone. The next day I woke up and the hole in my incision had collapsed into a black hollow cavity. There was discolored tissue spilling out of it, and it looked like it was going to open more. There was also another hole farther back on the incision that was starting to rip. I took photos, graphic photos of my body, and I sent them to Gallagher in a panic. At this point, I reached out to a local top surgeon and sent him my photos. He squeezed me in first thing the next morning, and when I saw him, he said that by sight alone, he could tell that it was severely infected. He was really angry with Dr. Gallagher, and he told me that she didn't give a shit about me. He said I would need surgery that Friday, so 3 days later. When I got home from that appointment, I opened my email to see Dr. Gallagher's response, expecting her to urge me to go seek a second opinion given the complications that I was having, and instead she told me it was looking good and that it wasn't infected. I was put under anesthesia for a second surgery on the 2nd of September, and they took out over half a foot of dead, rotten tissue from my left side of my body. The doctors told me that I could have gone septic and that this bacteria has a very high mortality rate. Gallagher had told me to do absolutely nothing about it. If I had listened to her, I would be dead. They gave me an extra large drain and I had to have it in for over 3 weeks. When I shared my story on Twitter, I got countless replies from people expressing that they had similar issues with Gallagher, including others who almost died. Please share this. Please stay safe. Medium article with the details is in my bio.
Thanksgiving originally celebrated the 1637 massacre of the Pequot tribe. English and Dutch pilgrims surrounded and shot the Pequot natives. Women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burnt alive. The rotting flesh could be smelled a mile away. John Winthrop, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, declared a day of Thanksgiving after the slaughter. The remaining women and children were sold into slavery while the rest were murdered. Following a successful raid against the Pequot, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the Indian savages. Next Thanksgiving, when you gather with your loved ones to thank God for all your blessings, think about the thousands of natives that were murdered on these national holidays. Truth is,
I don't speak dog ho. I don't care what no bitch say. I say on her mind, I got condos in that bitch head.
I'm convinced that under late-stage capitalism, having a job or career is more of a status symbol than a means of making money. Like, I feel like the economy has gotten so bad that having a job serves no other purpose than to show people you interact with that you are a productive member of society. Up until last year, I was working as a medical assistant and I absolutely hated it. Not because of the patients, but because of how disorganized the company I was working for was. And it was then I realized that the thing attaching me to this job was the reaction I got socially when I told people what I did. I didn't have to worry about them thinking I was a bum. I didn't have to worry about them calling me lazy, even though I was fucking miserable. On top of that, I was still living paycheck to paycheck, so the money wasn't even worth it. Well, it wasn't until I quit that it dawned on me that the same people putting me down for being unemployed desperately need those jobs to validate their existence. People fear being called lazy because lazy under capitalism translates to useless. You're not useless.
I get a pat down 100% of the time I fly.
I had to go through TSA after I had revisional surgery on a breast reduction, and I couldn't lift my arms above my head. So I asked for a private screening. And when the TSA agent pulled me aside, she said she was going to do a thorough pat down. And I said, oh, please be careful. Like, I just had surgery. You can't push on me. There can't be pressure. And she said, well, if I can't do pressure, then we're going to have a problem. I have to be able to do the exam to protocol. And I was like, I couldn't go through the scanner because I couldn't lift my arms up. You really think pushing down on a place that has vulnerable stitches is a good idea? Like, what? It hurt. And when I flinched at the pain, she looked at me like I went for like a weapon. I should have just walked through the security thing and like put my arms up for half a second, because at least I could have controlled what my body was doing. TSA is just performance art at this point. Look up Adam Ruins Everything. He does a great episode on it.
Danço hula hooky, cha cha cha, sou estrela no céu.
I stand up to parents at private events the same way that I do at public events. I do, but I go about it differently. These situations don't come up as often at private events because I've already spoken to the adult a number of times and I have an idea as to the kind of person that they are. I like to say that I'm successful enough to afford my morals, and I'll just turn a job down if something doesn't sit right. Things still happen. A few weeks ago, I was hired for what I was told was a girl's 9th birthday party. 15 kids, mermaid themed, easy peasy. I got all set up and said that I was ready for the birthday girl. I knew something was up as soon as they sat down. This was not a child that was excited for their birthday party. Hi, what's your name? I already knew that it was Amanda, but I always like to let the child tell me. They whispered something that I didn't quite catch, but the mom's supersonic hearing did. Amanda, we talked about this. There won't be any of this Andy business today. If you want to pretend to be a boy tomorrow, that's fine. But today, you're Amanda. Do you know what you want to be painted as? And as the mom was walking away, she looked over and said, get something mermaid themed to go with the party. Do you want something mermaid themed? Not really, they said. Well, the ocean's a big place, I said. Let's figure it out. They decided on a pirate, and while I was painting, they told me that their preferred name was Andy, but Mom refused to use it. I asked them if I could use Mandy instead. At least it sounded like their preferred name, and I didn't think it would upset Mom, and they were very happy with that. When the mom saw the face paint, I took full responsibility and said that I thought it was fine since mermaids and pirates typically go together. This child was surrounded by family and friends, and if I had said something, it could have made a very uncomfortable situation and ruined the party. Instead, I chose to let that child know that I respected their choices, and we came up with something that worked. Was it a perfect ending? No, but at least Andy knew that there was somebody at that party that was in their corner.
I'm assuming that unless you live under a rock, you've probably heard the term body doubling before, especially on TikTok. Now, I'm not one of those people that is going to gatekeep ADHD. I think that it serves no benefit to anyone, not even myself, and I have ADHD. If you were hoping for that kind of video, keep on scrolling. What I'm actually going to talk about is how I think that I can draw a direct line from the increase in need of body doubling to the degradation of community spaces due to capitalism. That's what this video is going to be about, so if you're interested in that, stick around. What is body doubling? Make sure that we're all on the same page. Body doubling is where someone who is typically neurodivergent feels like difficult tasks are a lot easier to accomplish just by someone else being present. That doesn't even mean that the person has to be helping them. Just by having another body present, difficult tasks become a lot easier. And this has to do with executive function and all those things, and there are more and more people being diagnosed with conditions that would be classified as neurodivergent. Now, aside from the obvious detection bias that exists of, hey, once we come up with a diagnosis and we know that this thing exists, obviously there are going to be more cases of it because now we know what we're looking for. Aside from that, there are other reasons why neurodivergency is on the rise. And I have talked about this in some of my other TikToks, but specifically the anthropological background of evolutionary mismatch and space-time compression. If you're curious about those, go check out the other TikToks because I've already made them. I am going to add the caveat of, obviously with anthropology it is pretty hard to prove any of these things, but these are just some of the theories for why we're seeing what we're seeing. And a lot of them kind of make a lot of sense if you just think about it. And you can go read up on the research that's being done if you're really, really curious. That's honestly where a lot of this is done. A lot of people have been asking me for books, and unfortunately a lot of it is just raw research and like lectures and stuff. Okay, but now you're probably wondering, okay, that's great, but how does that connect back to capitalism? Well, let me explain. About 100 years ago, we had really good public transportation. We also had really good community spaces. Specifically, if you look at like urban development before segregation and before all that fun stuff, we had things like this. But then capitalism took over, and see, public transportation like trolleys are not profitable, but you know what is? The individual car.
So then it became this ugly shit. And this. I hate traffic so much, Jesus.
You know, it's a lot more expensive for utilities, for land, and for all of that. The suburbs. So capitalism was like, well, we have to split up the community because that's a lot more profitable. And to tie it even more, I bet that we've all seen the recent studies that show that loneliness, like said here, is on the rise, and that it's a huge problem, and we probably need to fix it, which is probably only leading to more violence and more of those issues. So basically, my thesis is that through the degradation of community spaces and public transportation, we successfully made it to where every single task needs to be individually done, which made a rise in people needing body doubling, and we needed to come up with a word for it to describe what it was because we had no idea why people were suffering. And on top of that, people are really lonely and people are sad.